everybody, it's Dwayne again. I'm back for another lesson, and hope you're doing well with all the rain and the grass growing, and not being able to keep up with all the grass and the rain and everything. And some days I don't know if I need to get on the lawnmower or get on a boat, so to speak. It's been a strange summer so far. July is usually not this wet, but tonight we're on lesson 15. And this will be weeks 29, and next week will be week 30. Okay, in this program, and the name of this lesson tonight is victory. And I mean, there's something about that V word that I like. I just like the sound of it, right? I mean, it's an amazing thing. It's everybody loves to have a little victory in their life, and we're still on principle 5. We started that with the last lesson, so it's still fairly new, and we still have a good bit to learn about it. But and when we're on step 6 again, which we still have a good bit to learn about that. That's what we're going to be learning about over the next, probably the next month. So principle 5 says, voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life, and humbly ask Him to remove my character defects. The verse that goes with that is, happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. Matthew 5:6. Step 6 says we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects. So not only did we ask Him to remove them, we were humbly ready for Him to remove them. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. For about a month now, we have mentioned, Justin McClure, which was the girl that fell into the well. I'm sure you remember, unless this is your first night coming to see me. She's the one that fell into the well 20 years ago, little girl, and she cried out from way down in the depths of that little shaft that she had fallen into. And thank God someone happened to be walking by and heard her cries. If she had not been crying out, that person would have kept walking, and she probably would have died, unless someone else would have came by and heard her cries. Or if 10 people would have walked by, and if she hadn't been crying out, asking for help, she still would have died, because nobody would have known she was down in that shaft. Nobody would have known that. So she cried out. That was one good thing. She was scared and confused, as many of us are when we're in a cold, dark place and lonely. The person found help. When they got to her, they sent someone down there to be with her, that could get close enough, that could talk to her, and to help maybe keep her from doing something, to make her situation worse, such as falling even deeper in the well where they couldn't get her out. And they kept working on it. They came up with a plan and dug in sideways or whatever they did until they got down there to her, and they got her out. And it was all over the news. It was a big deal. I guess you could call that a victory, right? Because she was in a cold, dark place, edge of death, could have died very easily, but God saw fit that she not die, and someone heard her cries and got her out. So principle 5 is about asking God to remove character defects. Step 6 is about wanting God to remove those character defects, and also about being ready for God to remove those character defects. So we're going to talk about having to have victory over these character defects in our life, okay? And the first thing about having victory over that is admitting that you have some character defects. You cannot get over character defects and have victory over those without first admitting that you have character defects, okay? That's a big deal. So anyway, here's the acronym that talks about victory for each letter of the word victory, okay? V stands for voluntarily submit. I stands for character defects. C stands for change my mind, or change your mind. T stands for turn over character defects. O stands for one day at a time, R stands for recovery is a process, and Y stands for you choose to change, or you must choose to change. So, so we're going to start with the first one tonight, okay? V stands for voluntarily submit. Excuse the water, but it's a hot, humid day today, man. It's like a sauna down here in the South, I'm telling you. It really is. Voluntarily submit to change everything God wants us to, and humbly ask Him to remove any weaknesses or character defects. You know, we've learned the hard way that, for one, you know, we haven't even admitted our character defects, and two, even if we did and tried to remove them, we definitely had difficulty and probably did not succeed in changing some of the things in our life, especially if we're pretty strong-willed and had been doing those things for many years. That's why we need God's help in this. So, I have a saying, I've said it for years, voluntary submission is much easier process than involuntary submission. So, voluntary submission is much easier than involuntary submission, okay? Because, you know, if you have to submit, screaming, falling on your face, being dragged, you know, that's not a lot of fun. You get scratched up and banged up, and it's angry. It's a terrible way to go. And God really wants you to submit on your own, okay? And it's a much easier and less painful process to do that. Remember that horse that I had that I told you about that ran through the fence? Okay, the stud horse. You know, he had an especially bad day and he wanted to see what was on the other side of the fence. The grass is always greener, right? No, not really. So anyway, I come home one day and he's out there laying in the field and he wasn't moving, not an inch. And I went out there and I thought he was dead. Thank God the wire didn't just slash him up like I've heard stories of. But he was wrapped up in it pretty bad. I had to get some wire cutters to cut him out. And he laid perfectly still for me until I got him out. As soon as that last wire was cut, he was up. But he was definitely humble after that. You know, the wire humbled him. And sometimes life circumstances will humble you. Some of you here tonight have been through some of those situations. I mean, a lot of the people that I've met over the years, not all of them, but, you know, half of them come in to celebrate recovery, and, you know, a good many of them, not half of them, but I'd say at least a third, you know, pretty much hit rock bottom. You know, life finally caught up with them. The things they were doing finally caught up with them in a bad kind of way. And so they're kind of like that horse laying on the ground there in the pasture. They, except instead of just an electric fence that wasn't even on, you know, they probably had razor wire wrapped around them, so to speak. So, you know, bad situation. So, you know, if you get in those situations, God has recourse, you know, to get you turned around. It's not impossible, you know. The farther you get off the correct path just means you got a little bit more walking to do to get back on the right path. I mean, if you never get far off the wrong path, you really don't have far to walk back, okay? So it doesn't take you as long. You probably don't learn some of the lessons that you would have learned if you'd have gotten off on a bad path, on a way off the path, you know. You probably are limited in your scope as far as how many people you can help that are in that situation, but you know, you still don't have much far to get off to, you know, to get back on the right path. You know, if you're way off the path, you got a little process to go, and we're going to talk about that some more tonight. But it's definitely a worthwhile process. That sun is in my eyes, so bear with me here. I'm sweating and have sun in my eyes, so that's an interesting July combination here in the South. You know, many of you have been taken down like that horse was taken down, okay? You went through a fence or something and you fell, okay? It's a painful thing. It's a painful thing, you know, but God can heal you. God can heal those around you that you just took down with you when you fell. But, you know, basically you have to want it. You have to want it, you know? Not only do you have to want it, but, you know, if you're in a bad shape, you really And even if you're not in bad shape, you need God's help. You need God's help in the process, and He's perfectly able to help you. So, part of maturing is recognizing your strengths and your weaknesses, and then promoting your strengths. Okay, promote your strengths. Find what areas in your life you have strengths. I mean, that's what you got your inventory for, right? We worked on that for a couple of months a while back. If you haven't, if you're new here tonight, go back and actually you probably need to get back to the beginning, but get back into your inventory. So you know your strengths, so you hone in on those strengths and you focus them, man. You sharpen them, and you get into areas where your strengths are, and that's what you do, man. That's what you do. But your weaknesses, you recognize them. You write them down in your inventory. You recognize what those weaknesses are, and then you mitigate those weaknesses. What that means is you don't get yourself in situations where you're going to fall flat on your face, okay? You mitigate those weaknesses. You don't, to strengthen your weaknesses, you don't do that by surrounding yourself by the temptations to your weakness. If your weakness is alcohol and you're freshly off of it, or if your weakness is drugs and you're freshly off of it, then you don't go hang around a bunch of people who are drinking and doing drugs. If your temptation is beautiful women, then you try to stay away from beautiful women and try not to talk to them, or if they talk to you, you just try to be nice and get out of that situation, if you can. You don't know what else to tell you. Kind of let your hair grow out, get a little bushy-tailed, and act a little antisocial. I don't know what to tell you about that situation if you're one of those where, beautiful women come around you all the time. You may have to change your personality a little bit for a little while and do some things. Go get you an old 84 Toyota with about 400,000 miles on it, and rust spots on it, and newspaper sitting on the seat, to cover up the holes in the cushions. I mean, do something, do something, do whatever it takes, but you get into areas where your strengths are, and you stay away from your weak areas, and you slowly strengthen those weak areas until pretty soon you can be standing right there with a beautiful woman with the eyes all twinkling right there in front of you, and you can smile, and you can, talk about business, and you can walk off and let her alone without hurting her feelings about it. Anyway, so someone once told me there was a story: if the gate is left open, the bull's going to go through. But the key to this thing is, even when the gate is open, to stand there at the gate and look over there at the grass on the other side, and to be strong enough not to go through. And it's possible. It's possible. It happens all the time. The grass is not always greener. Sometimes it feels like it is, and it looks like it is, but the grass is not always greener, and most of the time it's not on the other side of the fence. Happiness is pretty much making the grass prettier on your side of the fence. Fertilize your own grass on your side of the fence. Take care of it, and it's going to be an amazing thing for you, okay? I promise you that. You fertilize the grass right around you, you forget about the grass on the other side of the fence. All right. Romans 12:1-2 says, "Offer yourselves as a living sacrifice to God, dedicated to His service and pleasing to Him. Let God transform you inwardly by a complete change of your mind." You remember when I was talking very early on about modern science is starting to catch up with the Bible a little bit by saying that there's basically these pathways in your brain that habits form. And these habits connect these neural pathways together for you to do certain things. And that's one reason you're driven to do certain things, especially if you've been doing them for a number of years. And it's going to take a little process to reroute some of those neural pathways into a different direction. And that's what this is talking about here. Let God transform you inwardly by a complete change of your mind. And let God help you in that process. You can't do it alone, but you do have some decisions that you do have to make on your own. And then ask God to help you follow through on those decisions. The I in victory stands for identify your character defects. That's what that inventory was about. That's what your inventory was about, was identifying some of those character defects. And so the question now is, you need to pull out your inventory sheets, and you need to look at those sheets, and you need to pick out which one of the character defects you want to work on first, because it can be overwhelming if you, especially, if you have a whole lot of character defects, it can be overwhelming to try to work on them all at the same time. So you just have to pick one. Which one is doing the most destruction in your life? Which one is doing the most destruction with family and personal relationships, or holding you back in life? That's probably the one that you need to look at first, okay? If you were to talk to a financial advisor, we're talking about kind of like an analogy to what I'm talking about as far as defects here, is if you were to talk to a financial advisor about debt, and you had 5 credit cards, then he would probably tell you to take the one that's got the highest interest on it and pay on that one first and get it wiped out, and then cut that thing up, okay? But if that one is so huge, if the debt is so huge that you get discouraged, and it's just going to take you so many years to get it cut up, get it paid off, even though it might have a little higher interest, he might say, well, get one of the more manageable cards where you maybe only have a couple of $100 on it or something like that. Get that one, pay that off, cut it off, and then you feel good about yourself. You build up confidence in yourself. You just did something. You did something and you saw it. It only took you a couple of months to do it. You cut it up. Now you can move on to the one up, a little bit higher on the list. It's got maybe $300 on it. Pay that one off, cut it up. Work your way up to the bigger one, because if you start out with the bigger one, sometimes you get discouraged because you don't really see the progress that you're making, so to speak. And those little ones are, a lot of times, they're the ones with the higher interest anyway. Not always, but a lot of times. So identify your character defects and then work on that. Change the things you can, and remember to always do it with God's help. And don't be arrogant about it. Recognize that you need God's help. Just like in that dream I was telling you about a couple weeks ago. Realizing that I needed God's help, asking Him for the help, asking Him what to do, and then I went and tried to do it by myself. It really wasn't working out. So then I went ahead and asked Him to help me follow through on it, to help me do it. I couldn't do it without Him. And that takes humility. It takes humility to admit that you need somebody to help you, even if it is God. I mean, it does. It takes humility even in real life, if it's a person. Just McClure didn't have a choice. She was scared to death, and she was dark and lonely, and she didn't know what was going on, or maybe she did, but she didn't have a choice to scream out. Some of us think we have a choice when we're doing the same stupid things over and over and over, and we need some help. And being humble and admitting it is important, not being arrogant about it. Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. So keep God involved in the process the whole time. Keep God involved in the process. Admit that, accept that, and be okay with that. That's just part of the process. C in victory stands for change your mind. Changing your mind, there's nothing that's going to happen if you don't change your mind. Back to that lesson about insanity, where, insanity is, doing the same thing over and over and over, but expecting it to be different tomorrow, expecting things to be different. That's the definition, or the sarcastic definition of insanity, okay? So, 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "Therefore, if everyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old is gone, and the new is here." And Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good and pleasing and perfect will." And again, back to the renewing of the mind. It goes back to those neural pathways. You can change. You just have to want to change, and then you have to start making baby steps in the right direction. If you keep walking in the same direction you've been walking in, it's going to keep taking you to the same stinking, dirty water that you're drinking, okay? If you start making baby steps toward the clean water or the better water, then, you know, things are going to be better. You know, but there's going to be some resistance because you're in a habit to constantly walking over here this direction. So you're going to have to make some changes, okay? And those changes are going to have to turn into a habit. And then the habits are going to change your mind. They're going to change. But you have to initiate the change. You have to take the steps toward the other clean water to start with. You have to do that. Nobody else can do that for you. That has got to be on you. It's your choice. You walk this way. You've been walking that way 10 years. If you don't make a change, you're going to keep walking that way. Make a conscious change. Look over this way. Start walking the other way, okay? You know, our minds are like a sponge. I mean, you've heard that since you were in elementary school. Our minds are like a sponge. It absorbs whatever you're around. I knew a good guy once, man. He was a great guy. And he got to hanging around some bad, I'm talking some bad people. I mean, and I'm not judgmental now. I mean, I'm trying not to be condescending here. Everybody has done bad things. I mean, everybody has. But, you know, I hate to see someone that's on the right track fall off and just go the wrong direction. And I told him, I said, you know, look, you hang around the garbage dumpsters long enough, you're going to come out smelling like garbage. I mean, God, it knows it's the truth, you know. And none of us want to smell like garbage, but all of us have smelled like garbage at some point or another in our lives. And we know we smell like garbage, you know. I mean, it's not anything that's a secret. I mean, so why do it? Why start? You know, you have to make a change. You have to control, you know, and make sure positive things. Make sure you're reading and watching positive things. Make sure you're thinking about positive things, good things, because if you overly think about bad things all the time and negative things, and you hang around bad and negative people all the time, you know, that stuff's going to rub off on you. That's just the way it is. You know, the old saying, we're made up of our habits, you know, that's absolutely true. Whether you believe it or not doesn't make it any less true. It's true, okay? And so you watch what I say long enough and you'll understand that I'm telling the truth here. You know, life is about time, and what we allow in our minds is what we are. You know, if we change the scenery for the better, then we can become better. I mean, that's all it is to it. You know, we're lucky in that sense. We're humans. God gave us 2 legs and He gave us a brain. You know, plants can't do that. You know, a tree can't do that. I mean, basically wherever the seed comes up is where that plant or tree is going to have to grow. If it came up in crappy soil that doesn't have any nutrients, that never gets any water, that has brambles all around it, you know, that has other trees that are much higher than it, shading it out where it can't ever get any sunlight, you know, well, guess what? That tree's pretty well screwed. I mean, it doesn't have a chance to move. It's going to die there. It's not going to make it. It's going to die. You know, whether it's a plant or a tree, it's going to die. It's going to die. But God gave us a brain, He gave us a heart, and He gave us 2 legs, and He gave us hands. That means, you know, we get to walk away from things. You know, we get to walk away from them. We get to put ourselves in a different environment where there's better soil and where we can get the proper nutrients and where we can get the proper water. We don't have to stay in an abusive environment or a destructive environment. We don't have to. God gave us 2 legs, you know. So think about the tree example. Think about the plant example. You know, sometimes the seed gets lucky and comes up in good soil, gets plenty of sunlight, and it's in a place where it can get plenty of water, and it's the right environment for that particular species of tree or plant. And it thrives. It thrives. Put yourself in some good soil, some good nutrients, and good environment, and you can thrive. You can thrive. Believe me when I say that. All right, the T in victory stands for turn over character defects to Jesus Christ. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord and He will lift you up. Humility is strength. Arrogance is weakness. Believe me when I say that. Arrogance is basically your ego not letting you succeed. You think you already know it all, right? So you can't learn anything. If you humble yourselves, you can learn something from everybody and everything, every situation. And you can certainly learn a lot of things from God. There's a whole lot of wisdom in the Bible. Whole lot of wisdom in the Bible. So you got to humble yourself to even admit there's a problem, for one thing. You got to humble yourself to admit that there's even a problem. And admitting that you have a problem or multiple problems, such as character defects and other things, is half of the process. I mean, it's the biggest half of the process, because getting to that point, if you never get to that point, you're never going to make it to the rest of the process. You have to start there, okay? And this is where Christ comes in, instead of blaming someone else for this or blaming someone else for that, accepting some responsibility, and then, having Christ come into your life, basically admitting that you need Him, admitting that you need someone else, admitting that you need something more divine and powerful than you are into your life is a great step in the process, especially if you're a strong-willed person. Humbling yourself before the Lord makes a difference. As the verse says, He will lift you up. Let God lift you up. Let God lift you up. That's where the power is. You'll see. You'll see. And it'll bring peace in your life. The O in victory stands for one day at a time. Making a choice for change can happen overnight, but making progress in that change will not necessarily happen overnight. You need a strong desire to create change, and you also need to make a decision for the change. But you can't expect instant changes in your life or relationships. You got to have patience, and you have to trust the process. Especially for impulsive people. It's actually a genetic thing. Some people are impulsive, and their daddy was impulsive, or their mama was impulsive, or both of their parents were impulsive. In other words, impulsivity, there's strengths and weaknesses to that, just like anything else, okay? If you're impulsive, it's kind of an instinctual nature for things. Some people really don't have natural instincts, so to speak, but what they have is an ability to logically reason things through. And that helps them make probably better decisions, because they're not impulsive decisions. But, where impulsivity comes in, that's actually a benefit, is like if you're driving down the road and a big dog or cow or something runs out in front of you, or a car runs out in front of you. Someone who's not impulsive, or someone who's not really very instinctual, their brain isn't really moving fast enough to process which way to jerk the wheel and hit the brakes at the same time to keep from hitting that animal. So they're more likely, 10 times likely, probably going to splatter that thing, because they can't logically do the math that quick for all the mechanical things they have to do in a hurry. But someone who's impulsive can. But when you're making impulsive decisions about life, you run into problems, and so you have to slow down. And so the same thing goes for, you get impatient because you want to see progress instantly. You want instant gratification on the progress. Buddy, there is no instant gratification on the process. It's going to take a little while, okay? You just got to trust me. And you just got to make the decision, and you got to be in there for the long haul. And you got to make a decision that you're going to stay in there, and you're going to wait for the fruits to come, because they will. You're going to be rewarded for it in more ways than you know. But you got to not let yourself get discouraged, because it's not going to happen overnight, because you didn't get there in that place overnight. It took you a period of years to get there. It's going to take you a little while to get out now. You can gauge the process if you're doing a journal. You can write what's going on, and then, a year from now, you can look back at what happened a year before, and you can see the progress you're making. tree just fell in the woods. And I was here to hear it. That's funny. Anyway, sorry about that. Was my ADHD going right there. So let me get back on track here. That tree got me distracted. All right. So anyway, back to the impulsiveness. Back to the one day at a time. Okay, you're not born into this world an adult, right? You know, everybody knows you're born as a baby. You don't know how to walk, you don't know how to talk, you don't know how to crawl, you don't know, all you know how to eat and cry. That's all you know. You know how to poop and pee, and that's about it, okay? So, when you're reborn again, I mean, that's a strong word when they say the word reborn. You don't just pop out an adult Christian, okay? You pop out a little baby that cries a lot, you know, and it gets into trouble and tries to manipulate people to get their way, okay? When you become an adult, you know, Christian, you know, you don't cry as much. I mean, and you take on responsibilities, and you grow, and you progress in a lot of different areas of your life, and it makes things better, you know, because, you know, when you're young, you got a little support blanket. Your mom and your dad are with you, but they're not going to be with you forever, so you have to become an adult. And it's the same thing when you become a Christian, okay? You got to become an adult someday. And so, but it's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of childish Christians out there, and a lot of people are judging childish Christians about how the children Christians are judging them, but they're doing the same thing by judging the baby Christians, you know. I mean, you can't do that. It's still judgment whether you're doing it or not, you know. So you recognize your projection on that, and then you grow from it and become a better person. Basically, God grafted us onto the vine, and once you make that important decision to be grafted onto God's vine, grapevine, then you know you might not make fruits at first, you know, as far as grapes, but you know you're going to grow, and you know you trust that you got a good foundation, and you trust that you're going to get the proper nutrients if you do, you know, what you're supposed to do, and so you trust it. But anyway, I've got to have something to talk about next week, so I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about this one day at a time next week, and for right now, I'm going to just say, you know, I hope you come back next week, and I hope you have a good week between now and then, and we'll see you next time.